I walked into the kitchen the morning after Tyler's elaborate birthday celebration, finding a half-eaten grocery store cake on the counter with a crumpled handwritten note that read, "Sorry money's tight. Hope you understand. Love, Mom and Dad." Outside, workers were still cleaning up from Tyler's backyard concert stage, and Tyler's brand new BMW sat gleaming in the driveway, like a monument to everything wrong with my family. The contrast hit like a physical blow to my chest. When Patricia walked in and saw me staring at the pathetic cake remnants, she actually laughed and said, "Why are you always so dramatic about everything?" That's when something inside me finally snapped. The laughter echoing from my mother's lips felt like nails on a chalkboard. I turned to face her, holding up the crumpled note between my fingers. "Dramatic. You think I'm being dramatic about this?" Patricia rolled her eyes and poured herself coffee from the expensive machine they'd bought last month. "Delbert, you're 28 years old. Maybe it's time you stopped expecting birthday parties like you're still 12. This isn't about wanting a party, Mom. This is about basic respect." I gestured toward the window where Tyler's new car sparkled in the morning sunlight. "You flew his college buddies in from 3 different states, hired a live band catered barbecue from that fancy place downtown, and bought him a $30,000 car. For my birthday 3 months ago, you gave me a gift card to Target. That was a $50 gift card." She protested, as if the amount somehow justified everything. $50 versus $50,000. Do you hear yourself right now? My father Frank shuffled into the kitchen wearing his weekend golf attire, avoiding eye contact. "Morning, son. Coffee's fresh if you want some. Dad, can you explain to me how money's suddenly tight when Tyler gets a BMW and I get grocery store clearance cake?" Frank's jaw tightened as he fumbled with his coffee mug. "Look, Delbert, we've invested differently in you boys' futures over the years. Tyler's just starting his career, needed some help getting established. Invested differently." The words tasted bitter. "What exactly have you invested in my future? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've invested everything in Tyler and left me with table scraps." "You've always been more independent," Patricia chimed in defensively. "You never needed as much support. Tyler's more sensitive, requires more encouragement." "More sensitive?" I could feel my voice rising. "Or more spoiled?" "Don't you dare talk about your brother that way," she snapped. "Tyler appreciates everything we do for him. You just complain constantly about what we don't give you." That stung because it held a grain of truth that made me question myself for a split second. But then I looked at that pathetic cake again and remembered every birthday, every Christmas, every achievement where Tyler received celebration, and I received acknowledgement at best. "You know what, you're right. I'm done complaining." I headed toward the stairs. "I'm also done pretending this is normal family behavior." "Where are you going?" Frank called after me. "To pack." "Pack for what?" Patricia's voice carried a note of panic she was trying to hide. "I'm leaving. If money's tight and I'm such a burden on your generosity, I'll remove myself from the equation." I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, which had remained largely unchanged since high school. Tyler's room down the hall had been redecorated twice in the past 5 years, most recently, with the expensive gaming setup and smart TV. My room still had the same poster of a vintage Mustang I'd hung up in 10th grade. As I pulled my suitcase from the closet, I could hear Tyler's voice drifting from his room. He was on a video call with someone, probably one of his college friends who'd flown in for the celebration. "Dude, you should have seen it," Tyler was saying. "My parents really went all out. The band was incredible and the car is absolutely perfect. I'm talking leather seats, premium sound system, the works. My family really knows how to make someone feel special." You know, my stomach turned. Tyler had no idea about the inequity. In his world, this level of treatment was normal, expected even. He'd grown up believing he deserved luxury while I deserved leftovers. I folded clothes mechanically, my mind racing. 28 years of birthdays, graduations, achievements, and disappointments flashed through my memory. Tyler's high school graduation party with 200 guests versus my quiet dinner at chain restaurant. Tyler's college send-off with a new laptop and furniture for his dorm versus my community college textbooks purchased used. The pattern had been there all along, but I'd convinced myself it was coincidence or timing. "Making a statement, are we?" Patricia appeared in my doorway, arms crossed. "Making a choice." I corrected, not looking up from my packing. "Your father and I worked very hard to provide for both of you boys. We've sacrificed plenty over the years." "Sacrificed for Tyler, you mean? I've been supporting myself since I was 18. When's the last time you sacrificed anything for me?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Life isn't always perfectly equal, Delbert. Sometimes one child needs more support than the other. Support is one thing, Mom. Favoritism is something else entirely." I zipped up my suitcase and grabbed my laptop bag. As I headed downstairs, I noticed something I'd overlooked earlier. Mail was scattered across the kitchen counter, and among the bills and advertisements were bank statements and business documents with my father's construction company letterhead. One envelope had been torn open carelessly, revealing a bank statement inside. I glanced toward the living room where my parents were having a hushed conversation, then looked down at the statement. The checking account balance showed $214,632. My blood turned to ice. Money's tight. The lie felt like a physical slap. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the backyard still littered with remnants of Tyler's party. Folding chairs stacked beside the professional stage setup, catering trays in garbage bags, and that gleaming BMW parked like a trophy in the center of it all. I posted it on social media with a simple caption. Family priorities. My brother's 25th birthday celebration versus my 28th. Sometimes a picture really is worth 1,000 words. Delbert, wait. Frank appeared as I reached my car. "Let's talk about this like adults." "Adults?" I laughed bitterly. "Adults don't lie about money being tight when they have over $200,000 in checking." His face went pale. "You looked at private financial documents. They were sitting on the counter next to my consolation cake. Hard to miss." I threw my bags in the back seat. "Don't worry, Dad. I won't be a financial burden on the family anymore." "Son, please! You're overreacting to all this." Overreacting. I started the engine. "I spent 30 years thinking I wasn't good enough, that I hadn't earned your pride or investment. Turns out I was right about not earning it, just wrong about the reason why." I backed out of the driveway, leaving Frank standing there in his golf clothes, looking older than I'd ever seen him look. The drive to Portland took 3 hours, giving me plenty of time to second-guess every decision I'd made in the past week. By the time I reached Marcus's apartment, doubt was creeping in alongside the anger. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe there were financial complexities I didn't understand. Maybe posting that photo had been petty and vindictive. Marcus opened his door before I could knock. "Saw you coming up the stairs through the window. You look like someone just told you Santa Claus was a fraud. Worse, someone told me my parents were frauds." He stepped aside to let me in. Marcus had been my roommate during our final 2 years at Portland State, and he'd witnessed enough of my family dynamics to understand the situation without requiring extensive explanation. The infamous Tyler birthday celebration finally happened. He asked, handing me a beer from his fridge. "You could say that." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo I'd posted. "This was his party yesterday. This was my birthday celebration today." I scrolled to another photo showing the sad cake and handwritten note. Marcus studied the images with the focused attention of someone who worked in data analysis. "That's not just favoritism, man. That's psychological warfare. It gets better. They told me money was tight, but I saw a bank statement showing over $200,000 in checking. They lied about being broke." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "That's next-level manipulation." I showed him the social media post I'd made. I probably shouldn't have aired family business online, but I was so angry I couldn't think straight. Marcus refreshed the page and his eyes widened. "Dude, look at this. In the 4 hours since I'd posted the photo, it had been shared 800 times and received over 2,000 comments. People were responding with their own stories of family favoritism, words of support, and outrage on my behalf. The post was spreading far beyond my immediate circle of friends. "This is going viral," Marcus said, scrolling through the comments. "Look at these responses. You've struck a nerve with a lot of people." I read over his shoulder. Stories of parents who'd paid for one sibling's college while the other took loans. Families who'd bought cars for some children, but not others. Christmas morning disparities that lasted into adulthood. The comments revealed a disturbing pattern of parental favoritism that apparently affected far more families than I'd realized. Local news stations are reaching out. Marcus pointed to several direct messages. Channel 8 wants to interview you about family inequality. Channel 12 is asking for a statement. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Why did you post that picture? Mom's crying and Dad's furious. This is private family business." I showed the message to Marcus, who shook his head. Notice how he's not denying the inequality or asking if you're okay. He's worried about the family image. Another message appeared, this one from an unknown number. "Hi Delbert, my name is Richard Sterling. I saw your post about family dynamics and wanted to reach out. I'm a business owner who grew up in a similar situation. Would you be interested in meeting for coffee tomorrow? I have a professional opportunity that might interest you." "Who's Richard Sterling?" Marcus asked, looking over my shoulder. I Googled the name and found an impressive LinkedIn profile. Sterling was the founder and CEO of Cascade Digital Marketing, a successful Portland-based company specializing in brand development for tech startups. His company had been featured in several business publications for its innovative approach to social media marketing and employee satisfaction programs. "This guy's legitimate," I said, scrolling through articles about Sterling's company. Founded Cascade Digital 5 years ago, grew it from 3 employees to 47, focusing on ethical marketing practices. Marcus grinned. "Your family dysfunction might have just opened a professional door." I spent the evening reading through the comments on my post. The overwhelming support was validating, but also emotionally overwhelming. Strangers were sharing intimate details about their own family struggles, finding solidarity in shared experiences of parental favoritism. One comment stood out. "My parents bought my sister a house for her wedding gift but gave me a toaster for mine. 20 years later, I still remember how that felt. Thank you for having the courage to speak up about this issue." Another read, "Family favoritism doesn't just hurt the unfavored child. It also damages the favored one by teaching them they don't need to earn love or success. Both children suffer just differently. That perspective hadn't occurred to me before." Tyler wasn't necessarily the villain in this story. He was as much a victim of our parents' dysfunction as I was, just in a different way. My phone rang around 10 p.m. Dad's number appeared on the screen. "Are you coming back?" His voice sounded strained when I answered. "I don't know yet. Your mother's upset about that picture you posted online. People are saying terrible things about our family. People are responding to what they see, Dad. Maybe the problem isn't the picture, but what the picture shows." There was a long pause. "We can discuss this when you get home. If I come home, there's a difference." "Delbert, you're our son. Of course you'll come home. Tyler's your son too, but somehow he gets treated like a prince while I get treated like a tenant. Being related doesn't automatically guarantee a relationship." "I know you're angry, but destroying the family reputation won't solve anything." "I'm not destroying anything, Dad. I'm revealing what already exists." After I hung up, Marcus poured 2 glasses of whiskey and sat across from me at his small kitchen table. "You know what the crazy part about all this is? Just one crazy part. The crazy part is that your parents probably think they've been fair. People justify their behavior in incredible ways when it serves their interests. How do you justify giving one son a BMW and the other son a used cake? By convincing yourself the son who got the cake is stronger and doesn't need as much support. By telling yourself the son who got the car is more fragile and requires more encouragement. By creating a narrative where inequality becomes kindness. I stared into my whiskey glass, watching the amber liquid swirl around the ice cubes. What if I'm wrong? What if there are reasons I don't understand? What if there aren't? Marcus countered. What if the only reason is that they like Tyler more than you and everything else is elaborate justification? The possibility hit me like cold water. Not financial reasons or personality differences or strategic parenting decisions, just simple, cruel preference. Either way, Marcus continued, you need to decide what kind of relationship you want with them going forward, because pretending this didn't happen won't make it disappear. I agreed to meet Richard Sterling for coffee the next morning, curious about both the professional opportunity and his perspective on family favoritism. As I lay on Marcus's couch that night, I wondered if walking away from my family was the beginning of finding a better one. The next morning I met Richard Sterling at a small coffee shop in Portland's Pearl District. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with an easy smile and genuine warmth that immediately put me at ease. Thank you for meeting with me on such short notice, he said as we settled into a corner booth. I hope you don't mind that I reached out directly. Your post yesterday really resonated with me. It seems to have resonated with a lot of people, I replied, still amazed by the viral response. I had no idea family favoritism was such a common experience. Unfortunately, it's far more prevalent than most people realize. My own situation was remarkably similar to yours. Richard stirred sugar into his coffee. My parents funded my younger brother's medical school while I worked 3 jobs to pay for community college. When I started my first business and it failed, they told me I should have been more practical like my brother. When his practice struggled during his residency, they bought him a condo and covered his expenses for 2 years. How did you handle it? I stopped expecting anything from them and started building my own support system. Best decision I ever made. Richard pulled out his tablet and showed me Cascade Digital's company website. I built this company with people who value merit over favoritism, effort over entitlement. As he described the company culture and growth trajectory, I realized this wasn't a pity offer. Sterling had been following my freelance graphic design work through mutual connections for months, impressed by my portfolio and client testimonials. We need a creative director who understands authentic storytelling and brand development, someone who's experienced real adversity and knows how to connect with genuine emotion rather than manufactured sentiment. He leaned forward. Your portfolio shows exactly that kind of authenticity. The position came with a salary nearly double what I was making freelance plus company equity and comprehensive benefits. More importantly, it offered the chance to work with a team that valued authenticity and ethical practices. I'll need to think about it, I said, though my heart was already saying yes. Of course, take your time. Richard handed me his business card. But don't take too much time. Opportunities like this don't come around often, and talent like yours shouldn't be wasted on clients who don't appreciate it. As I drove back to Marcus's apartment, my phone buzzed with notifications. The social media post had continued spreading overnight, now shared over 3,000 times with comments that painted a disturbing picture of family dysfunction across America. But among the supportive messages, a disturbing pattern was emerging. Several people claiming to know Tyler were posting their own stories about him. College friends sharing details about expensive vacations he'd taken, designer clothes he'd worn, and most significantly money he'd borrowed from them that had never been repaid. One comment from someone named Jake Williams caught my attention. Tyler borrowed $1,500 from me sophomore year for emergency expenses and never paid it back. When I asked about it junior year, he said his parents would handle it, but I never heard anything. Guess I know where that $1,500 really went? Another from Sarah Chen. Tyler asked me to cover his portion of spring break costs because his allowance was late, then posted pictures from Cabo wearing a Rolex. I'm still out $600 from that trip. The comments painted a picture of someone who'd been enabled to live beyond his means with no accountability for his actions. Tyler had been using our parents' money to maintain a lifestyle that required borrowing from friends when the family funds ran short. My phone rang with Tyler's number. "You need to take that post down right now," he said without preamble. "People are saying horrible things about me online." "Are they lying?" "That's not the point. This is private family business, and you're embarrassing all of us." The private family business became public when you started borrowing money from friends that our parents' accounts ultimately covered. There was silence on the other end. "Jake Williams says you owe him $1,500. I continued. "Sarah Chen says $600. How many other people are you into for money that mom and dad have been secretly paying back?" "That's completely different." "Different? How different?" "Because it's you instead of me." Different because borrowing money you can't repay is somehow more acceptable than calling out inequality. I always intended to pay them back. With what money you've never held a job longer than 3 months? Every dollar you spend comes from our parents. At least I don't air family problems on social media like some kind of psychopath. The word hit me like ice water. Psychopath. For posting one picture showing the difference in how we're treated. Yes, normal people handle family disagreements privately. Normal families don't have these kinds of disagreements, Tyler. Normal parents don't buy one son a BMW while giving the other son leftover cake. Maybe if you'd shown more appreciation for what they did give you, they would have given you more. The entitlement in his voice was breathtaking. What exactly should I have shown appreciation for being treated like an afterthought for 30 years? They fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. That's more than a lot of people get. They fed, clothed, and housed you too, Tyler. But somehow you also got concert tickets, vacation trips, a car, and a party with a live band. The basic necessities aren't special treatment. They're the legal minimum required to avoid child abuse charges. I hung up before he could respond. That evening, Marcus and I were watching a basketball game when my phone rang with an unknown local number. "Delbert, this is Carol, your mother's sister. I saw your post online and I think we need to talk." Carol lived about 20 miles from my parents in a small house I'd visited maybe 5 times in my entire life. She'd worked as a bookkeeper for my father's construction company until about 2 years ago, when she'd been suddenly fired for what my parents called personality conflicts. "I've been waiting for the right moment to reach out to you," she said. "What happened to you with that birthday situation is just the tip of the iceberg." "What do you mean?" "Can you meet me tomorrow evening? There are things you need to know about your parents' finances and where Tyler's money really comes from." The gravity in her voice sent chills down my spine. "Carol, what are you talking about? I can't discuss it over the phone. But Delbert, your parents have been doing things with company money that could land them in federal prison. And Tyler's lifestyle has been funded by money that doesn't belong to your family." I agreed to meet her the following evening, though I spent the next 24 hours wondering what new nightmare I was walking into. The family dysfunction I'd exposed was apparently just the surface layer of something much darker and more complicated. When Richard Sterling called to follow up on the job offer, I accepted without hesitation. Whatever I was about to learn about my family, I had the feeling I was going to need financial independence and a fresh start more than I'd ever realized. Carol's house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by mature oak trees that gave it an atmosphere of secrecy, even in daylight. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her. My mother's younger sister had always been the responsible one, but now she looked exhausted and anxious with deep circles under her eyes. "Come in, please. Thank you for coming." She led me into a small living room where cardboard boxes were stacked against one wall. "I've been organizing documentation for months, waiting for the right moment to act." "Carol, what's going on? You mentioned federal prison." She sat across from me and opened a thick manila folder. "Your father's company manages pension funds for 43 employees, money that's supposed to be invested safely for their retirement." She handed me a spreadsheet covered in highlighter marks. "For the past 3 years, Frank and Patricia have been systematically stealing from those accounts to fund Tyler's lifestyle." My stomach dropped as I scanned the numbers. Pension fund withdrawals totaling over $120,000, all documented with falsified explanations about administrative expenses and investment transfers. They fired me when I started asking questions about the discrepancies, Carol continued. I'd been the company bookkeeper for 8 years, and I knew something was wrong when pension account balances stopped matching employee contribution records. This can't be real. I stared at the documentation, hoping the numbers would somehow rearrange themselves. My parents wouldn't steal retirement money from their employees. Your parents convinced themselves they were borrowing, not stealing. Frank kept saying he'd pay it back once a big project came through. Patricia rationalized it as temporary cash flow management. Carol opened another folder. But look at what that money actually funded. She showed me credit card statements and receipts. Tyler's college expenses, including tuition payments, that far exceeded normal costs. Spring break vacations to expensive destinations. Designer clothes and electronics. The BMW down payment. Even payments to several of Tyler's friends, which I now realized were the loan repayments that had kept Tyler's social reputation intact. They've been living a financial fantasy, Carol said, stealing from people who trusted Frank to secure their futures, also Tyler could maintain a lifestyle that would impress his college friends. I felt sick. Do the employees know? Not yet. But the annual pension review is next month, and the missing money will be impossible to hide. Frank's been stalling the review process, but the state requires it to happen before year-end. What happens when it's discovered? Federal charges for embezzlement and pension fraud. Prison sentences for both your parents. Complete financial ruin for the family. Carol leaned forward. But there's something else you need to know. She handed me another document, this one from a law office. Your maternal grandfather left equal inheritance trusts for both you and Tyler when he died 5 years ago. Trusts worth approximately $300,000 each. I remembered Grandpa Robert's funeral, how my parents had handled all the legal arrangements while I was finishing my degree. Mom said Grandpa was disappointed in my choices and left everything to Tyler. That was a complete lie. Carol's voice hardened. Patricia has been managing both trusts, but she's been using your inheritance to cover the pension fund theft, while Tyler's trust remains untouched. She convinced herself you wouldn't notice or care since you'd been told you weren't inheriting anything anyway. The betrayal was so comprehensive it took my breath away. Not only had my parents stolen from their employees, they'd stolen from me to cover their crimes, while lying about my grandfather's feelings toward me. Why are you telling me this now? Because Tyler tried to break into the company offices yesterday. I caught him on security cameras attempting to alter financial records. She handed me printed screenshots from surveillance footage. He was trying to forge documents to make the pension fund theft look like legitimate business expenses. In the grainy images, Tyler was clearly visible at my father's desk, papers spread around him as he worked with what appeared to be correction fluid and a copy machine. He knows about the embezzlement. He's known for months. Frank told him during his birthday weekend, probably feeling guilty about the BMW purchase. Instead of being horrified, Tyler offered to help cover it up to protect his inheritance. Carol's expression was grim. That's when I knew I had to act. I stared at the evidence spread across Carol's coffee table. Financial records, surveillance footage, legal documents, and credit card statements that painted a picture of systematic theft, family deception, and now attempted fraud. What do you want me to do with this information? That's up to you. But those 43 employees deserve to know their retirement money has been stolen. And you deserve to know the truth about your inheritance and your grandfather's real feelings about you. I drove back to Marcus's apartment in a daze, the manila folders sitting on my passenger seat like unexploded bombs. The family dysfunction I'd posted about on social media was nothing compared to the criminal enterprise my parents had been operating. That evening, Frank had another heart attack. Patricia called me crying, begging me to come to the hospital. He's stable, but the doctors say stress could cause another episode. Please, Delbert, we need our family together right now. Part of me wanted to ignore her call to let them handle their medical crisis, the same way they'd handled my birthday. But another part of me, the part that had been trained for 30 years to prioritize family loyalty over personal dignity, couldn't ignore a genuine medical emergency. I arrived at the hospital to find Tyler pacing the hallway, looking younger and more frightened than I'd seen him since childhood. Whatever entitled confidence he'd developed over the years had evaporated in the face of our father's mortality. "He's going to be okay," Tyler said as I approached. "The doctor said it was minor, but he needs to reduce stress and change his lifestyle." Patricia emerged from Frank's room, her makeup streaked and her clothes wrinkled from sleeping in waiting room chairs. "Oh, Delbert. Thank God you came. I was so worried you wouldn't want to see him after everything that's happened. How is he? Tired and scared? The doctor said stress was definitely a factor." She looked at me with desperate eyes. "I know we have a lot to work through as a family, but right now he just needs to know his sons are here for him." I visited Frank's room, where he lay connected to monitors looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen him. The man who'd seemed larger than life throughout my childhood now looked like what he'd always been, someone who'd made terrible choices and was finally facing the consequences. "I'm sorry, son," he whispered when he saw me. "About the birthday, about the money, about all of it. I know I've failed you as a father." "Dad, we can talk about this when you're feeling better." "No, I need to say this now." His voice was weak but determined. I convinced myself Tyler needed more help because he was struggling. But the truth is, I was proud of how independent you'd become, and I used that as an excuse to neglect you. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received from him, but it felt hollow, knowing about the stolen pension money and my inheritance. His confession was still only scratching the surface of the real problem. "Just focus on getting better, Dad. Will you forgive me?" I looked at my father lying in that hospital bed, knowing what I knew about the embezzlement and lies, and realized forgiveness would require a level of honesty our family had never achieved. "I'll forgive you when you tell me the whole truth about everything." Frank was released from the hospital after 3 days with strict instructions to reduce stress exercise regularly and avoid emotional confrontation. The irony wasn't lost on me that the man who'd caused enormous emotional stress in my life now needed to avoid stress to preserve his health. Patricia scheduled a family meeting for the following Sunday, insisting we needed to work through our differences like adults. What she didn't know was that I now possessed comprehensive documentation of their financial crimes and planned to confront them with evidence rather than emotions. I spent Saturday consulting with an employment attorney recommended by Richard Sterling, who confirmed that the pension fund theft was a serious federal crime with mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines. The attorney also verified that my grandfather's inheritance had been illegally withheld, making Patricia guilty of both embezzlement and trust fund violations. The good news is that your parents can still make restitution and potentially avoid prison time if they cooperate fully and compensate all victims, the attorney explained. The bad news is that their financial exposure is enormous, and their business will likely need to be liquidated to cover the damages. Sunday arrived with unusually warm weather for late October. I drove to my parents' house with Carol's documentation in a briefcase, feeling like I was heading to a deposition rather than a family discussion. Tyler's BMW was parked in the driveway, though it now seemed less like a symbol of privilege and more like evidence of criminal activity. I wondered how many employee retirement contributions had funded that down payment. Patricia had prepared coffee and pastries, apparently hoping to create a civilized atmosphere for what she expected would be a traditional family reconciliation. Frank sat at the head of the kitchen table, wearing casual clothes that made him look older and more vulnerable than his usual business attire. "Thank you both for coming," Patricia began. "I know we've had some misunderstandings recently, but family is more important than any disagreement." Misunderstandings. I placed the briefcase on the table. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "Delbert, Dad just got out of the hospital. Maybe we could avoid drama today. I'm not interested in creating drama, Tyler. I'm interested in addressing facts." I opened the briefcase and removed Carol's documentation. Facts about pension fund theft, forged business records, and inheritance fraud. The color drained from Patricia's face. Frank's coffee mug stopped halfway to his lips. "I don't know what Carol told you," Frank said slowly, "but she was terminated for cause after making false accusations about company finances." False accusations. I spread the financial records across the table. These bank statements show pension fund withdrawals totaling $123,000 over 3 years. Withdrawals that funded Tyler's college expenses, spring break trips, car payments, and loan repayments to his friends. Tyler stared at the documents like they might catch fire. "I don't understand what any of this means. It means our parents have been stealing retirement money from their employees to pay for your lifestyle. Money that belonged to 43 people who trusted Dad to invest it safely for their futures." "That's not theft," Frank protested weakly. "Those were temporary transfers to address cash flow issues. I always intended to repay every penny. With what money the pension review is next month, and you can't hide $123,000 in missing funds." I pulled out Tyler's credit card statements. Especially when the money paid for spring break in Cabo designer clothes and a BMW down payment. Patricia began crying. "We thought we were helping Tyler get established. We thought the business would recover and we could pay everything back before anyone noticed. You thought wrong, and it gets worse." I placed the inheritance documents on the table. "Grandpa Robert left equal trusts for Tyler and me, $300,000 each. But you've been lying to me for 5 years, claiming I was written out of the will while using my inheritance to cover your pension fund theft." Tyler's mouth fell open. "That's impossible. Mom said Grandpa was disappointed in Delbert and left everything to me." Mom lied. Grandpa loved both his grandsons equally, but Patricia decided I didn't deserve my inheritance because I was too independent to need financial help. Frank buried his head in his hands. "This is a nightmare. How did everything get so complicated?" "It got complicated when you started stealing from people who trusted you and lying to your children about their grandfather's wishes." I pulled out the surveillance photos. "It got criminal when Tyler tried to break into the office to forge documents and cover up the embezzlement." Tyler stared at the photos showing him at Frank's desk with papers and correction supplies. "I was just trying to help fix the accounting errors." "Those weren't accounting errors. They were evidence of systematic theft, and you attempted to destroy that evidence to obstruct a federal investigation." "Federal investigation?" Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. "The pension review will trigger an automatic investigation when the missing funds are discovered. Unless full restitution is made immediately, both of you will face federal charges for embezzlement, pension fraud, and racketeering." Frank looked up with desperate eyes. "What do you want us to do?" "I want you to make full restitution to every employee whose retirement money you stole. I want immediate access to my grandfather's inheritance that you've been illegally withholding. And I want Tyler to face consequences for attempted fraud instead of being protected from the results of his actions." "We don't have $123,000 to pay back," Patricia said through her tears. "Then you'll have to liquidate assets. Sell the house, sell Tyler's car, sell whatever it takes to make your employees whole again." Tyler finally spoke up, his voice shaky. "I didn't know the money was stolen. I thought it was just family money. You knew when Dad told you during your birthday weekend, and instead of being horrified, you offered to help cover it up by altering business records." "I was trying to protect the family. You were trying to protect your inheritance and lifestyle. There's a difference." Frank reached across the table toward me. "Son, please. We made terrible mistakes, but we're still family. Help us figure out how to fix this without destroying everything." I looked at my father's outstretched hand and realized that for the first time in our relationship, he needed me more than I needed him. The power dynamic that had defined our family for decades had finally shifted. "I'll help you fix it," I said. "But it's going to be done legally and ethically with full transparency and accountability. No more lies, no more favoritism, and no more stealing from people who trusted you." "What does that mean practically?" Patricia asked. "It means we're going to meet with the family attorney tomorrow morning to discuss full disclosure and restitution. It means Tyler's car gets sold to help fund the pension repayments. And it means both of you accept responsibility for your actions instead of making excuses or blaming stress." I stood up and closed the briefcase. I'll give you 24 hours to decide if you want to handle this the easy way or the hard way. But those employees are getting their money back, and I'm getting the inheritance that was rightfully mine." As I walked toward the door, Frank called after me. "Delbert, wait. How do we know you won't just take your inheritance and leave us to handle this mess alone?" I turned back to face him. "Because unlike you, I don't abandon family members when things get difficult. But I also don't enable criminal behavior just to keep peace." That evening, Richard Sterling called to check on my first week at Cascade Digital. "How are you settling in? I know it's been a challenging time with your family situation." "Actually, the job is the only stable thing in my life right now. Everything else is falling apart, but at least I have work that makes sense." "Sometimes external chaos makes us appreciate internal order," Richard observed. "Whatever's happening with your family, remember that you can't control their choices, only your responses to their choices." It was advice I needed to hear, because I was about to discover that my family's dysfunction went even deeper than financial crimes and inheritance fraud. Monday morning arrived with the first frost of the season, and I met my parents at their attorney's office, feeling like I was attending a funeral for the family I'd thought I knew. James Morrison had been representing my father's business interests for over 15 years, and his expression suggested he was as shocked by the revelations as I had been. "Frank, Patricia, I have to be completely honest with you," Morrison said after reviewing Carol's documentation. "The pension fund situation constitutes multiple federal crimes with mandatory minimum sentences. We're not talking about misdemeanor accounting errors." Patricia sat rigidly in her chair, still wearing the same clothes from yesterday's meeting. "How much prison time are we looking at? If prosecuted to the full extent, between 5 and 10 years each for embezzlement, plus additional time for the inheritance fraud." Morrison removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "However, federal prosecutors are often willing to negotiate if defendants make immediate and complete restitution while cooperating fully with investigations." "We don't have the money to make immediate restitution," Frank admitted. "The company's cash flow is tied up in ongoing projects, and our personal assets wouldn't cover the full amount." "Then we need to discuss liquidation options." Morrison opened a legal pad. "The business could be sold as a going concern, which would provide funds for employee compensation while potentially preserving jobs." "Sold to whom?" Frank's voice carried the weight of someone watching his life's work dissolve. "Actually," I said, "I might have a solution for that." Everyone turned to look at me. Richard Sterling. My new employer mentioned that Cascade Digital has been looking to diversify into construction project management. He's specifically interested in acquiring established local businesses with strong employee bases and community connections. Morrison raised his eyebrows. "Your new employer would consider purchasing your father's company. He's been researching construction industry opportunities for months. A business with Frank's client base and employee experience would save Cascade years of market development." I looked directly at my father. Of course, the acquisition would be contingent on complete transparency about the pension fund situation and a comprehensive transition plan. "You'd help arrange the sale of our company?" Patricia asked incredulously. "I'd help arrange the sale of a company that's been systematically stealing from its employees, yes. The difference is that Sterling's acquisition would preserve jobs and ensure full pension restoration instead of leaving 43 families financially devastated." Frank stared at me for a long moment. "You've really thought this through." "I've had to. When parents spend decades making terrible choices, their children eventually have to become the adults in the relationship." Morrison took notes as I explained Sterling's expansion plans and ethical business practices. The more I talked, the more I realized this acquisition could solve multiple problems while creating genuine accountability. Sterling would want to retain existing employees but implement new financial oversight systems. I continued. Frank could potentially stay on as a project consultant, but all financial management would transfer to Cascade's accounting department. "Meaning I'd lose control of the business I built," Frank said quietly. "Meaning you'd lose control of the business you nearly destroyed through embezzlement," I corrected. but you'd retain the opportunity to use your expertise honestly while employees keep their jobs and recover their stolen retirement funds. Patricia finally spoke up. What about Tyler's situation? The attempted fraud charges. Tyler had been notably absent from the attorney meeting, claiming he needed to think about things at a friend's house. His absence spoke volumes about his willingness to face consequences for his actions. Tyler's cooperation with the investigation could influence how prosecutors handle his case, Morrison explained. If he provides testimony about his parents' activities and makes restitution for any money he knowingly received from stolen funds, charges might be reduced to misdemeanor levels. And if he doesn't cooperate, federal obstruction of justice charges carry their own prison sentences separate from whatever happens to Frank and Patricia. I pulled out my phone and called Tyler, putting the conversation on speaker. Tyler, we're at Morrison's office discussing legal options. You need to be here. I can't deal with this right now, Delbert. It's too overwhelming. It's going to be a lot more overwhelming when federal agents arrest you for obstruction of justice. Get down here in 30 minutes or I'm giving Morrison permission to inform the prosecutor that you're avoiding cooperation. You can't do that. You're supposed to be helping family. I am helping family. I'm trying to prevent you from spending 5 years in federal prison for protecting parents who stole money from working people. I looked around the room at Morrison, Frank, and Patricia. But my help requires your participation in fixing this situation instead of running from it. Tyler arrived 25 minutes later, looking disheveled and frightened. When Morrison explained the legal implications of his attempted document alteration, Tyler finally began to understand the gravity of his actions. I thought I was protecting the family. Tyler said, his voice barely audible. You thought you were protecting your inheritance, I replied. There's a difference. Over the next 4 hours, we developed a comprehensive plan for legal resolution. Sterling's company would acquire Frank's business at a fair market value, with acquisition funds going directly toward pension restitution and legal fees. Tyler would cooperate fully with any investigation while working to repay money he'd knowingly received from stolen funds. My grandfather's inheritance would be immediately released to my control, ending 5 years of illegal withholding. There's one more thing, I said as we prepared to leave Morrison's office. Tyler's BMW gets sold immediately with proceeds going toward employee compensation. Tyler looked stricken. That car is the only nice thing I've ever had. That car was purchased with stolen retirement money from people who worked their whole lives saving for security you destroyed with your entitlement. My patience was finally exhausted. You're 25 years old. It's time to start earning nice things instead of expecting other people to provide them. Patricia put her arm around Tyler protectively. He's still learning how to be responsible. He's been learning for 25 years. The lesson plan obviously isn't working. I stood up and shook Morrison's hand. I'll contact Sterling about the business acquisition. Tyler can keep learning responsibility from a jail cell if he prefers that educational approach. As we walked out of the attorney's office, Frank caught my arm. I know I have no right to ask this, but are you doing all this because you love us or because you hate us? I considered his question carefully. I'm doing this because I finally understand the difference between enabling dysfunction and loving people enough to hold them accountable for their actions. If that feels like hate to you, it's because you've confused love with permissiveness for so long that accountability seems foreign. Will you be able to forgive us? Ask me again after you've spent a year proving that you've actually changed instead of just promising to change. That evening, I called Sterling to discuss the acquisition opportunity. His interest was immediate and enthusiastic, particularly when I explained the employee retention potential and established client relationships. This could accelerate our construction division plans by 2 years, Sterling said. When can we arrange a comprehensive business review? As soon as you're ready. But Sterling, you should know this isn't just a business opportunity for me. It's family crisis management with the goal of preventing 43 people from losing their retirement security. That makes me want to move even faster, he replied. Good businesses are built by people who care about more than just profit margins. As I fell asleep on Marcus's couch that night, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was part of a family that valued integrity over image and merit over favoritism. It just wasn't the family I'd been born into. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of what had formerly been Frank's construction company, now operating as Cascade Construction Management, watching my father explain project timelines to a room full of employees who'd recovered their full pension contributions plus interest. The acquisition had been completed 3 months earlier, with every stolen dollar repaid and comprehensive financial oversight systems implemented. Frank looked different now. Smaller, somehow, but also more genuine. The swagger that had characterized his business dealings for decades had been replaced by careful attention to detail and genuine concern for employee welfare. His heart attack had been a wake-up call, but losing control of his company had been the education he'd needed about accountability and consequence. The Morrison project should be completed by month end. Frank reported to Sterling, who attended these weekly meetings to stay current on operations. All subcontractor payments are current, and we're tracking 2% under budget. It was a far cry from the loose financial management that had enabled the pension fund theft. Every expenditure now required approval from Cascade's accounting department, and all employee benefits were managed by independent fiduciary services. Tyler sat in the back of the room, taking notes. His role as junior project coordinator was entry-level work that required him to learn basic construction management from the ground up, but it was honest work that he was earning through effort rather than entitlement. The BMW had been sold to help fund pension restitution, and Tyler now drove a used Honda Civic that he'd purchased with money from his new salary. "Any questions about the Morrison timeline?" Sterling asked the room. Carol, who'd been hired as Cascade's new employee benefits coordinator, raised her hand. "What's our timeline for implementing the new apprenticeship program?" "We'll launch next month with 4 positions," Sterling replied. "Priority goes to current employees' family members who want to learn skilled trades." It was exactly the kind of ethical business practice that made working for Sterling personally satisfying, rather than just professionally successful. Cascade Digital had grown to 60 employees since I'd joined as creative director, and the construction division was adding another 25 jobs with genuine advancement opportunities. After the meeting, Tyler approached me in the hallway. "Hey, I wanted to thank you again for helping me get this position. I know I didn't deserve consideration given everything that happened. You're right, you didn't deserve it. But you've been earning it for 3 months now through consistent work and accountability." I looked at my younger brother, noting how different he seemed. Less entitled, more thoughtful, actually engaged with learning, rather than expecting success to be handed to him. "How does it feel to earn your own money? Harder than I expected, but also more satisfying." Tyler smiled ruefully. "I never realized how much anxiety comes with knowing you haven't actually earned what you have. Constantly worrying that someone might figure out you're not as capable as your circumstances suggest." It was the most insightful thing I'd ever heard him say. "What do you think changed for you?" "Losing everything honestly. The car, the money, the lifestyle, the friends who only liked me for what I could provide them." Tyler leaned against the wall. "It turns out most of my college relationships were pretty shallow. When I couldn't pay for expensive dinners or trips anymore, those friendships disappeared pretty quickly. That must have been difficult." "It was devastating initially. But then I started making friends with people here at work, people who knew I was starting over and didn't care about my past mistakes." Tyler's expression grew serious. "I realize now that Mom and Dad weren't doing me any favors with all that financial support. They were preventing me from developing actual life skills and genuine relationships." It was remarkable to hear Tyler acknowledge the downside of favoritism from the favored child's perspective. The comment from my viral social media post had been accurate. Family favoritism doesn't just hurt the unfavored child, it also damages the favored one by preventing authentic growth and character development. "Have you talked to Mom and Dad about this? We're all in family therapy now. Dr. Martinez helps us have conversations we never could have managed on our own." Tyler paused. They're starting to understand how their attempts to help me actually hurt both of us in different ways. Frank and Patricia had avoided federal charges by making complete restitution and cooperating fully with the pension fund investigation. They'd also sold their house and moved into a smaller condo using equity to fund additional employee compensation and legal fees. The lifestyle adjustment had been dramatic, but it had also forced them to confront the unsustainable spending patterns that had enabled the embezzlement. How's therapy going for them? It's hard for Dad to admit he made ethical compromises, and it's hard for Mom to admit she treated us unequally. But they're both working on it. Tyler looked directly at me. They ask about you every session. They know they destroyed your trust, and they're trying to figure out how to rebuild a relationship with you. What do you tell them? That you're doing better than any of us, and that maybe they should focus on becoming people who deserve your forgiveness rather than people who expect it. I was surprised by Tyler's maturity. The young man who'd called me a psychopath for posting about inequality had developed emotional intelligence I hadn't known he possessed. Sterling offered me a promotion to senior project coordinator, Tyler continued. But I'm not taking it yet. Why not? Because I want to earn it completely rather than just be qualified for it. I want another 6 months of proving I can handle the responsibilities before I accept additional authority. Tyler smiled. Turns out, delayed gratification feels better than immediate reward when you know you've actually earned it. That evening, I sat on the deck of my new apartment overlooking the Willamette River, reading quarterly reports for Cascade Digital's growth and employee satisfaction metrics. The company had exceeded all performance targets while maintaining the highest employee retention rate in Portland's tech sector. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Delbert, I know you might not want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that your grandfather would be proud of how you handled this situation. You showed more integrity and leadership than your father and I did, and I'm sorry it took a crisis for us to recognize what we had in you. It was the most honest communication I'd ever received from my mother. I scrolled through my social media feed, where the viral post about family favoritism had inspired an ongoing conversation about parental inequality and its long-term effects on children. Mental health professionals had used the post as a case study in family dynamics, and several people had reached out to share how my story had encouraged them to address similar situations in their own families. One message particularly stood out. Your post helped me realize I was enabling the same favoritism with my own children that my parents had shown between me and my sister. I'm working with a therapist now to ensure I treat all my kids equally. Thank you for having the courage to speak up. That comment captured exactly what I'd hoped to achieve. The experience had taught me that family dysfunction thrives in silence and secrecy, while accountability and transparency create opportunities for genuine healing. My phone rang with Richard Sterling's number. How was your first board meeting as a company partner? He asked. Surreal. A year ago, I was designing flyers for small businesses, and today I'm helping make decisions about a company with 85 employees. Merit has a way of revealing itself when given the opportunity, Sterling observed. Your work has been exceptional, and your ethical judgment during the family crisis proved you're ready for greater responsibility. The partnership offer had been unexpected but deeply satisfying. Sterling valued authentic leadership over inherited privilege, and he'd structured the partnership to reward performance rather than connections or favoritism. Any regrets about how you handled the family situation? Sterling asked. None. Walking away from dysfunction forced everyone to confront reality instead of continuing to enable destructive patterns. I watched sailboats navigate the river below my apartment. My parents are better people now that they can't buy their way out of consequences. Tyler's developing genuine character now that he has to earn success. And I'm building a life based on merit rather than family dynamics. What's your relationship with them like now? Honest for the first time. We're all in family therapy working on rebuilding trust through changed behavior rather than empty promises. I paused, considering how much my perspective had shifted. It turns out that loving someone sometimes means refusing to enable their worst impulses, even when that refusal feels cruel in the moment. That's wisdom that most people never learn. I had excellent teachers in dysfunction, which made recognizing healthy relationships easier by contrast. After we hung up, I reflected on the profound transformation my family had undergone in less than a year. The viral social media post that had started as an expression of frustration had ultimately become a catalyst for accountability, legal justice, and genuine personal growth. Frank was learning to lead through ethical example rather than financial manipulation. Patricia was learning to love her children equally rather than playing favorites. Tyler was learning to earn respect rather than expect privileges. And I was learning that self-worth comes from personal integrity rather than family validation. The experience had taught me that family favoritism isn't just about unequal gift-giving or celebration disparities. It's about the fundamental messages families send about human worth, effort, and character. When parents treat children unequally, they're teaching lessons about fairness, accountability, and justice that affect every relationship those children will have for the rest of their lives. Most importantly, I'd learned that walking away from toxic family dynamics isn't abandonment when done with the goal of creating space for healing rather than punishment. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for dysfunctional family members is refuse to participate in systems that enable their worst behaviors. My grandfather's inheritance had been fully restored, but the real inheritance he'd left me was the courage to demand better treatment and the wisdom to recognize that family relationships should be based on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. Standing on my apartment deck, watching the sun set over a city where I'd built a life based on merit and ethical relationships, I realized that finding my authentic family had required leaving my biological one long enough for all of us to learn how to be better people. The story that had started with a half-eaten cake and a handwritten note about tight money had ended with a family that had learned to value integrity over image accountability, over entitlement, and genuine love over enabling dysfunction. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced family favoritism that made you question your worth or your family's values? How did you handle the situation? And what did you learn about setting boundaries with people you love? Share your story in the comments below, and let me know if this experience resonates with your own family dynamics. If this story helped you think about your own family relationships differently, please give it a like and subscribe for more honest conversations about the challenges of building healthy relationships with difficult people. And share this with someone who might benefit from hearing that they're not alone in dealing with family dysfunction. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve to be treated with respect and fairness, regardless of whether that treatment comes from family members or the chosen family you build through your own life choices. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is demand better treatment, even when that demand forces everyone in your life to grow.